the minute you walk out the door, you have access to a million sermons, probably literally on different podcasts. But we do not always have access to safe places of co-regulating together because we are singing about love to love with people we love. If you are looking to move forward in your life towards your authentic dreams without sacrificing your emotional health, your nervous system, your relationships, or your spiritual health, well, you are in good company. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Courtney Lancaster, and this is a safe space for Christian creatives. This is the Heal Create podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Heal Create podcast. I literally, before I started recording this, I did one of those like, okay. Just because this topic is so near and dear to my heart. I don't think I have ever had such a dramatic love-hate relationship with any concept and practice and expression than I have with worship leading. And I don't think I'm alone there, but I certainly haven't heard a lot of people talk about it in that way. And worship leading for me is something that gave me so much freedom that I hadn't even known I had access to at a really young age. I was 14, 15. And I had never heard of worship music or the kind of like moving, charismatic, worship music that became such a huge part of Christian culture, like just within the last, 20 years. I had never heard of anything like that. Growing up in a really conservative church, the most that we expressed musically was in choir performances. I actually grew up in a denomination of church that didn't believe that instruments had a place in the church, which is like, yeah, I know. It's wild. Everything they sang a cappella. So I grew up thinking that when you went to church, you just opened up a hymnal and you sang a cappella with a bunch of people. I didn't know any different. And so it wasn't until I was a teenager that I went to a Vineyard youth group and they were singing, This is the Air I Breathe, Trading My Sorrows. They were singing these songs that I can't even explain what happened to me in youth group when I walked in, but I will be able to explain the context of my personal life, which was a lot of loneliness and a lot of restlessness and not really knowing who I was. And I mean, now I can say there was a lot of trauma that I hadn't dealt with, and something about worship music made me feel whole and seen and like a part of something hopeful. And I was a singer and I had done musical theater, but when I walked into youth group at 15, I think I auditioned like maybe the next week for the youth worship team. And it completely changed my life. It completely changed my life and guided the entire trajectory of my life. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. I led worship into I never really stopped. I did take a couple of year break, which I'll explain. And you probably already know if you've listened to this podcast, but from the time I was 15, I led worship on all kinds of different stages. And I didn't realize how unhealthy of a worship leader I was until I really crashed when I was about 30 years old. And it's been a long journey of my own trauma therapy, and I ended up going to ministry school and really like taking apart, all of the ideas that I had grown up with and the ideas I was being taught in ministry school. And I really like had to wrestle with my own relationship with God and this, this idea of church and what are we even doing in worship leading? And because I had overridden my own nervous system to get up on that stage every Sunday for years and years and years, it became something that felt very, very high stakes and kind of like dangerous in a lot of ways. It had beyond burnout. I like panic attacks and anxiety. And you can hear my story on another episode of this podcast, but I think it's titled literally like my story. But I say all this just to say I'm not the most qualified person to speak I mean, really on anything besides my own story. But I do feel like the history that I have enables me to speak to what I think a healthy worship leader could be. And I hope that this podcast goes out to whoever needs it, whether you are in a church and there's a worship leader on staff that you want to know how to support, whether you are a worship leader, whether you are a burned out worship leader, or whether you are somebody that's walked away from the church because the whole thing just seemed like emotional manipulation or worse. I want this to be and to paint a picture of what it could be to be a really supported and healthy and integrated, grounded worship leader. Because here's the thing. After so many years of my own deconstruction and reconstruction and really figuring out who I am and what I think about all of this, this Christian faith tradition and what worship music's place is in it, the more I think that it is potentially one of the most beautiful and human body honoring things that we can do in a church. There's so much that goes on in singing together with a group of people. It's co-regulating. So, when a nervous system, the part of your body that's constantly scanning the environment for safety or danger, triggering your body to be in either a safe state or a self-protected state of anxiety or shutdown or freeze. When a nervous system is interacting with another nervous system, studies have shown, overwhelming research, polyvagal theory is a great place to start, but overwhelming research has shown that when we are singing with other people, we are co-regulating. So we're sending signals of safety to our own bodies. And then our bodies, the safer they feel, send cues of safety to other bodies. And it's this beautiful collective experience, a felt sense of safety. And when a human body feels safe, they are able to experience connection, creativity, curiosity, courage, basically heaven on earth, which is what Jesus came to bring. So worship is potentially one of the most important and beautiful parts of the service. The speaker is, a part of the service, but he's one person. And we honestly have access to sermons. Like the minute you walk out the door, you have access to 1 million sermons, probably literally on different podcasts. But we do not always have access to safe places of co-regulating together because we are singing about love to love with people we love in an environment that is, hopefully built on love. That is a very rare thing. And it's something that I think, especially now, is so vital, so needed. And it's honestly so compelling to me, the idea of it and the potential of what it could be. So I just want to, again, give a hug to the worship leader that's listening. That's like, yeah, I don't know what I've been doing, but it's not been healthy. Or like, I want to do this more. I want to make this my career and I want to really do it well. This is what I believe would cultivate and create an environment for the best chance at emotional health, spiritual health, relational health, and physical health for the worship leader. The first thing that I would say, now I'm going to say this first, actually. These are the things within your control. Mostly within your control. We're going to go over the things that are not necessarily in your control because they're like the church that you work for or what they believe or whatever. But these are the things that are within your control as the worship leader. A relationship with a coach or counselor, period. You could be, I should say. I don't want to should on you, but ideally, you would be meeting with a coach or counselor at least twice a month. There's so much that happens to be able to show up and get on stage is technically it's to your nervous system to get on stage and to feel that exposure. As much as we say it's not about us, it's for God, it's still to your body. Your body doesn't know the difference. And it is technically a cue of danger. Now, it's danger that we can handle. If we're regulated, it's kind of that it's something that we can build capacity for to be able to handle. But you have to be prepared for what comes up when you're in on stage when you're in those spaces. There is a certification program that I'm doing right now that's the Fox method. It's polyvagal theory, dopamine theory, and internal family systems for performers and artists and creatives. It's absolutely thrilling feels like an understatement. I'm so lit up by all of this, but she talks about how it's very dangerous to be dysregulated, which is to have unresolved trauma or to have insecurity that you don't know how to be with or deal with, and to bring that on stage. And usually subconsciously hope that the audience or the congregation in this, in what we're talking about, in this context, is going to fill your needs. And I think it's something that so many worship leaders subconsciously do and they don't even realize. And it is a huge contributor to burnout, because basically you have these young parts of you that are looking to be seen, to be heard, developmental needs that we have to get met. And we get on stage and we don't even subconsciously realize that we are so hoping that those needs will be met. And the problem with that is that is not what the stage is for. So if you are a performer or a worship leader, you have to think of it as you are sort of the cosmic parent in the room, guiding people in a certain direction, offering them an experience of connection. And that goes for anybody on stage. A worship leader specifically, you are guiding them into the love of God. So a parent is regulated. They feel deeply safe in their body, ideally, deeply safe in their body, and they help the child regulate. A teacher helps their students regulate, and a performer or a worship leader helps the audience regulate. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal to be on stage. And we want to be aware that, this is studied, settled science. Nervous systems read nervous systems. And the nervous systems in the room, the people in the room, statistically speaking, 50% of people struggle with anxiety. Actually, side note, they have done a lot of research and have found that, I'm sorry, I'm not citing the things that I'm saying, which I know is a huge trigger and really annoying for people. I just did not prepare those citations. I will see if I can access them and find them and go back and find them. But the studies that they've done around people with anxiety and depression are no higher for artists and creatives than they are for the average person, which blew my freaking mind. The reason why artists and creatives struggle so much more is because they are putting themselves in these spaces where they are supposed to be the ones that regulate the audience, because they are so grounded and connected and they feel safe in their own body. And when the reverse happens, your self-protection, which is technically anxiety and depression, goes up, skyrockets on your behalf, because it's trying to protect you. And people will, and we know this about art performers especially, they'll either get their needs met on stage and then they'll be addicted to this act of performing, and maybe even burn down their lives in order to maintain, just getting on stage over and over again. Or they will feel like their needs are not met, and then they'll hide because it's too painful to get on stage and not have that met. What a coach or counselor will be able to do is help you access those parts of you that are most likely, like so many of us, looking to be seen, heard, validated, shown affection, protected, taught, played with, valued, and really begin to do the work of cultivating an internal space, your own secret place of a healthy connection to safety, to love and safety, to a place where, using your imagination in the context of working with a coach or counselor, you will be able to be with these young parts of you and learn how to regulate your own nervous system in order to get on stage and stay regulated throughout the duration of your leading worship. Which leads me to my second thing that ideally a healthy worship leader would be a deep understanding of their own nervous system. So like I said, your nervous system It starts with your neuroception in the back of your brain, and it goes, so many of you have heard this so many times. Bear with me. The back of your brain, and you go, and it signals to all of these nerves that go all throughout your body, that basically puts you in a certain state depending on how safe or in danger it feels. So if you are, feeling dysregulated. So let's say you just feel a little bit of, anxiety, which a lot of creatives are very sensitive to the environment. And you might feel some unease, some anxiety, some nervousness. Stage fright just means your nervous system doesn't quite yet feel safe to get on stage. Then what I did was a lot of this was the context that I was given was that this was spiritual warfare. I had no idea what was happening in my body. It was all spiritual, and it felt horrible and creepy and bad. And so I just was told that it was Satan trying to take my big destiny as a worship leader, and that anxiety was a, spirit, depression was a spirit, and that, I would always just rebuke it so much before going on stage. And then I would totally override my own self-protective mechanisms in my body in order to lead worship. And in some ways it made me a good worship leader because I was always fighting off this big sense of darkness. But oh gosh, unfortunately, it ruined my experience of life for a few years. I was so deeply burnt out. I literally went to the emergency room for panic attacks. And it was because I did this constantly. I was constantly I was getting a lot of opportunities. I felt so much panic and fear around my own life, around my own unresolved trauma. And getting on stage was how I felt a sense of identity and purpose and strength. And so I would just override my own body signals in order to do that. And what we know is that, your state creates your story. So how safe or in danger you feel will put you in whatever state you're experiencing. If your body senses that you're in a lot of danger, it might put you in a fight or flight state. And in that case, your thoughts are going to be really fast. They're going to be really worried, concerned, or really angry and irritated, maybe really panicky. And if you don't see that as a clue that you are dysregulated and need to access some safety, then you will think that that is some dark force trying to take you out. Same with depression, when your thoughts are just like unenergized, hopeless. What's the point? Well, you're in what's called a self-protective state of dorsal. And those thoughts feel really heavy and dark too. But I think worship leaders especially need to understand that the state creates your story. And that's essential for reading. It's being able to read your own body and know what clues are coming up as that are showing you how much safety and support you need to be able to get on stage. That's essential for leading other people, because if not, then you potentially could go on stage really dysregulated and then be either looking to get affirmation or dysregulating the audience. Dysregulating the audience in a lot of different ways. As a performer, you could be really looking for validation. There's a sense of neediness that you're bringing on stage, which is actually very self-sabotaging. Or you, as a worship leader, you could be dysregulating the audience by really heavily focusing on the darkness and fighting off the darkness. And if it feels good in the moment to rise above and find your fight and find your authority, but it's ultimately really dysregulating because we focused on the darkness. And so, I think that like a course on polyvagal theory, nervous system, I mean, you can look into the Heal Create course, which I have, but also books by Deb Dana, like I've talked about. Anchored by Deb Dana is a great place to start. Sarah Baldwin just put out a podcast called You Make Sense that is about all about a deep dive into the nervous system. There's honestly so many resources at this point, but really understanding yourself in that way is essential. A tool belt for your dysregulation. So when we need pre-care. When we know that we're about to go on stage, the 24 hours leading up to being on stage, we need to understand our capacity, where we're at on our autonomic ladder, which means how regulated or dysregulated we are. You You can look up the autonomic ladder or listen to the episode of mine called the autonomic ladder. And we want to know what tools we need to help ourselves feel deeply safe. And this can look like somatic tools. So, like, for example, there is an app that I like to use and like to recommend called the NeuroFit app. And it will give you exercises that you can do to help send cues of safety to your body to bring yourself a sense of relief, which is technically an escape from a sense of danger, and it can bring safety to your body. You might need to co-regulate, meaning you need to call a friend, you need to be held, you need to, either physically or emotionally, you need to talk it out and with somebody that's not worried about you and can really sit with you and help you come back into safety. There are so many different things that you can do, and having a toolbox full of ideas for what state you might be in. Like what you need if you're in a depressed state is different than what you need if you're anxious. And gosh, if you could rebuke anxiety and if you could heal by rebuking anxiety and depression, I would have been free 1,000 times. That is not a tool belt. That's not a tool. That is, we're talking about dealing with the body. Yes, of course, they're all connected, but in this case, what I'm highlighting and highly suggesting is that you pause on fighting the thoughts or the perceived sense of darkness, and you focus instead on bringing your human body safety. Jesus was such a regulated human being, and I love the Christian path because so many other spiritual traditions are but invite us to transcend our human condition. And Jesus is one of the only paths that invites us deeper into it. He was a regulated human being. And those are the things that are within your control that I think would really help. Really, really help. Essential, I would actually say. Things for any worship leader. I think on top of that, I know this is kind of a moving target and very variable, but a really trauma-informed culture around your worship team and individualized support for each worship team member, which I know is a tall order. But gosh, I don't know. I think because worship is so important, if we're not supporting our worship team, like we're really asking too much of them to go unsupported and do this major spiritual and physical task. Creating a family culture on your team where everybody is recognized. So this is the thing, while we cannot have our audience regulate or support or validate or make us feel seen and heard, that is incredibly unhealthy, and a lot of us do it subconsciously. We do want to be in a tight-knit community of people that help us feel seen and heard, because that is technically a safe way to heal relational wounds and to heal inner wounds. So your worship team can be that place. I would say if you're the worship leader, you still probably need your own tight-knit community outside of the worship team, since a lot of what you'll be doing inside of the worship team will most likely be guiding and being a regulating resource for them. I used to think that when I began to heal and recognize that a lot of what I thought was me fighting off the darkness in worship was actually my own body trying to send me signals that it felt unsafe. I kind of thought and didn't lead for a long time because I'm like, I just didn't think I would have the same passion for it. So much of the passion that I had around worship leading came from pushing back the enemy, pushing back the darkness. And the more that I healed, the less drive I felt for that, to be totally honest. The more I realized that love and connection push away, or I would even say, transcend or alchemize the darkness in such a much more sustainable way. And I know that there's, a lot of theological discussions to have there. I just want to tell you my experience, that I really recognized a lot of the darkness was coming from inside of me. And so the more that I healed, the less I knew how I was going to lead worship, and if I even wanted to. it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that we started going to a new church. And I had led worship a little bit here and there, but what I have realized, being a part of a church and then even leading worship a couple times before then and leading worship now at my church, is that I have just as much passion around leading worship because I am so passionate about people knowing how loved they are. I am so passionate, and I do feel a righteous anger for all of the pain that so many humans have endured. I feel so much passion for the children of God knowing how safe and loved they actually are. And it has been the most beautiful thing to feel my body coming online as this protective parent on stage, leading people right into the safety of God with sometimes like fury and passion, the passion that I used to have against the darkness, but now it's such a sustainable, way more sustainable passion to carry into worship leading. And it's something that I'm able to put down when I'm done and rest when I'm not leading worship. So just something to think about. I wanted to also give a bonus, couple of ideas for things that are a little more outside of your control as far as what creates the environment for a healthy worship leader. And that would be belonging to a church that has the budget to support your mental health and your development as a creative. So, I mean, this is like, we're talking like some kind of distant utopia because I have never heard of this. I'm hopeful it exists somewhere. I just haven't heard of it myself. A church where the worship leader is well paid and her therapy or his therapy is covered, and she is being developed through retreats or through conferences or through courses or whatever resources she needs to continue to develop as a Christian creative, would be, I think, would really revolutionize worship across the board. I really do, because of how vital and important I think worship leading and the worship experience is, like I've said, in our Christian practices. And so that would be ideal. Creative freedom within healthy collaboration. So I think that a lot of worship leaders and people on the creative teams of churches feel so burnt out because there is a lot of expectations and very, very small parameters for their actual free-flowing creativity. And it's such a shame too, because if you are pouring into the creativity and the inspiration of your worship leader and you're supporting their mental and emotional health, you better believe that what they're going to create is going to be powerful. And maybe that takes trust that you feel uncomfortable with, but I think I would bet on it and I would risk it, because that is how it's supposed to be. And we put worship leaders in these very tiny boxes. And I'm not saying that like anything goes, but because we are here to do this specific thing within worship, but there are the parameters should be so much wider than they are, and creatives should actually get to be what they are, which is creatives. They should be able to create, and they should be in trusting relationships with the other people on staff to be able to know what are the non-negotiables and the expectations, but to have really wide parameters within that to do what they feel called to create. That's why you hired them, is because that they are creatives. And if you are pouring into their health and their inspiration, they're going to create some pretty incredible things. Okay, the third thing is a church. This is, I guess this is an ideal list of things that would really create a healthy worship leader. A church that understands that worship is the most important part of the church service. Now, I know that I'm a worship leader, and probably any worship leaders would say that because it's my passion. It's the part that I like. But that's not why I'm saying it. I'm saying it for the reasons that I said earlier, which is that you can go and get a sermon from any church podcast immediately as soon as you walk out the door. In these times that we're in, where everybody is going through an emotional growth spurt and there's so much stress and tension. It's an election year and there's a lot going on. The ability to come together every week and sing, like I said, about love, to love with the people that you love, is the healthiest and most powerful thing that we get to do in church. And it's really rare. And so I'm not saying that the other parts are not very, very, very important. But I think that the emphasis on the pastor above worship is really detrimental. I really do. I think that at the very, I think that they should be understood and prioritized at the same level. And with the understanding that worship is the thing that we do collectively, we participate in collectively. Trauma resolves in worship. I mean, on a somatic level, on a physical level, trauma resolves when you are singing with a group of people, hopeful messages, and rehearsing hopeful messages over yourself. And that goes for worship in the kids program, and, play would probably be their worship in the kids program. But, it's so essential. And I think you can see the churches that do understand that and that really protect and pour into their worship programs. Gosh, the reward is so beautiful. It's so connecting and beautiful. And then the last thing I would say, of course I would say this, is trauma-informed church. Belonging to a trauma-informed church would really be ideal for the worship leader and for everybody, because with the understanding that we're technically speaking, I'm talking about technically speaking, we as human beings, as babies, are born into the world wired for love and connection, love and safety. We learn shame, which is the perceived disconnection from love, and unsafety, danger. And that is technically through traumas, capital T trauma, big events, or lowercase t trauma, just missed connection, missed emotional attunement over time. And that is to be trauma informed in this time is to be aware that the human being that is not functioning in healthy ways, that is not in community, that's not able to connect, that is struggling with anxiety and depression, that has coping adapted habits and maybe is hurting other people or hurting themselves, is somebody that is struggling with unresolved trauma, period. And so to be in a trauma-informed church is to understand that and to emphasize less on how bad we are, much less, not at all actually, on how bad we are, but on how, wounded we have been and how powerful we really are to move through the healing that it takes to be in a healthy body again and to be a beloved and expressing, your belovedness as a child of God. So these are my ideas around worship leading. In the church that I go to now, our poor worship leader, she's absolutely wonderful, but I'm like so passionate about this stuff. I basically fire hose her with all of these ideas. And so I thought I would put it here in the hopes that it really encourages somebody, that it really fires somebody up. If you're in a church leadership staff, or if you are a worship leader yourself, or if you know a worship leader, understand how technical and demanding and difficult that career is for so many reasons. On a spiritual plane, it's heavy lifting. On a physical plane, it's such a big ask on the nervous system and body. And on for a creative soul, highly sensitive creative soul, that's usually very tender. It can be a lot. So be kind to the worship leader in your life. Even if that worship leader is you, be kind to you. The Heal Create course is a course that I offer on my website, courtneylancaster.co. It's something that I am actually going to be running live next year, which I'm so excited about. And it might be something to look out for if you are somebody that wants to learn and understand and embody this work as you move forward in your own journey, worship leader or not, but especially for worship leaders. And if you are a worship leader and you pay and you follow along with me and you end up wanting to take the live course that I'm offering, please feel free to reach out for a discount that I would love to give you as a gift to you and as a thank you for leading people into love by singing about love in a room full of people that might drive you crazy, but that deep down you love. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.